Okay. A quick summary of what we will be talking about today, what I will be talking about. First of all, I will cover about very briefly how to recruit research participants via social media. In the past, we have organized sessions in which we provided more detailed instructions about this. This one will be just a very brief overview. We will then talk about advantages for cross-national research, and I will provide an overview of what we have done so far. And from that point onwards, I will focus on two main things, which is of interest to all researchers. One, cost, how costly was our research, and second, how did we do in terms of representativeness. Then we will talk about our quota sampling experience in Burkina Faso, and finish with discussing disadvantages and challenges. Okay. Well, first of all, we recruit our participants for survey research, online survey research, using advertisements on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. On screen right now, you see an example advertisement that we use in the United States to recruit research participants. This is how it looks. Um, I will be referring to Facebook, but just to note, when I refer to Facebook, I'm usually referring to both Facebook and Instagram. That's Meta social media companies. As when you advertise on Meta, you can easily advertise on both places once you create the advertisement, both on Facebook and Instagram. In our case, it is actually the case that we tell Meta to show our advertisements on both Facebook and Instagram, but most of our research participants actually come through Instagram advertisements. But anyway, this is how our advertisement look like, right? And then if people click on this, they're directed to our survey page. Now, how do you create this kind of advertisements on social media, on Facebook and Instagram? Well, brief overview. The first step is to set up a Facebook account and page. You need to have these to start advertising. Then you need to purchase advertisement space on Facebook and Instagram. This is important if you are new to social media advertisement. Facebook or Instagram never promises you a certain return for your advertisements. Like you are never promised to recruit, let's say, 1,000 research participants. You just buy advertisement space. Then it is up to you. It's up to your advertisements whether they can recruit or not. And then you run your advertisements on Facebook and Instagram. Users self-select into your advertisements. They either click or not. As I will show in next parts of this research, usually the rate is around 3%. 3% of social media users click into advertisements in our case, which is not that different from the success rate, as far as I know, of phone surveys. And then those who are clicking on your surveys are directed to survey platform, which can be on Qualtrics. Your survey can be hosted on Qualtrics, Google Form, SurveyMonkey, or any web page really. And then participants complete your survey. So this is how the process works in a very brief fashion. Now, there are tons of available resources if you need instructions to start running your own advertisements, right? First of all, Anya and I created a handbook 4 years ago. It is now a bit old. Many things have changed. Campaign names have changed, for example, although functions are still the same. You no longer need to do domain registry, for example. That was one of the most difficult parts when we wrote the handbook, and so on. So it's a bit old, but then there are newer resources. On screen, you see a systematic literature review written by Zaza Zindel, who has joined one of our previous sessions, who has presented in one of our previous sessions, and a guideline, again, again by scholars who presented in our session in the past, a guideline on how to recruit respondents for online surveys. These are more recent resources that you can benefit from. And again, when we come across resources written by scholars, we share it through mailing lists. So if you have written recently or created any resource recently, please feel free to share it with us so that we can distribute it across our mailing list. In general, though, you should keep in mind that when you are advertising on Facebook and Instagram, you are part of a very large social network, like advertisers on social media. You can find so many YouTube resources. You can find resources on Reddit and so on. So you just need to explore, just like exploring any other thing on Google. Okay. Now, let's start with advantages of cross-national research using Facebook and Instagram. First of all, of course, we have started running advertisements a couple years ago. Many things have changed, but still we are believing that there's a huge potential here. And these tools are especially useful for comparative political scientists who run surveys across multiple countries. Now, in for these researchers, of course, main options are either going with Facebook, Instagram, social media advertisements. We can include TikTok as well in this group, or working with a commercial panel company. Now, we will present some comparisons about Facebook samples versus commercial panel companies. But in general, Meta is everywhere. It is a consistent way of collecting data. When you are working with a commercial panel company, commercial online panel company, you don't really know how they recruited their respondents across different countries. They are understandably vague about that one. In the case of Facebook, you know where your respondents are coming from in every single country, and you are consistent about that one. You have full control, and it is cheap. We when we first started talking about this, we would usually say that, well, also it's very easy to start advertising. That's no more the case really, and we will talk about disadvantages towards the end of the presentation. That's something to keep in mind, but still there are so many advantages of this method. Now, as we have said, as I have just said, Meta is everywhere, right? So just look at the screen here. We see a number of regular Facebook users in shades of blue, and it goes from, if it's white, the countries that are in white are countries in which it is practically impossible to run Facebook surveys because less than 1 million people use Facebook, according to official numbers. And then countries in light shades of very light shades of blue, well, it may be a bit difficult for you to use Facebook advertisements, to recruit research participants because there are only a couple million Facebook users, and so you have a very narrow pool. As it gets darker in terms of blue, it becomes easier, of course, to use this method. It becomes, the potential is increasing. And you will see that, like, there are so many countries with varying levels of economic development, political structure, in which it is feasible to use Facebook advertisements, Facebook and Instagram advertisements. So, and it's not just in developed countries. So here you see a percentage of population using Facebook. Again, rather than numbers, this is percentage. And if they are white, it is less than 25%. So even if you can run advertisements in these countries because the overall population is more than 1 million. There will be concerns about representativeness, of course, and unfortunately, most of African countries are in that group. But the remaining countries in shades of blue are countries in which you will feel more comfortable about recruiting a diverse set of respondents, right? Of course, in the technical sense of the term, your samples will never be representative because you don't know the chance of a single respondent to take your survey. So you cannot calculate, and it is not distributed equally across the population. So you cannot call these samples as representative. But in many countries, your samples will be diverse enough to give you strong inferences. Okay, let's first first introduce our substantial survey, the substantial survey we conducted. This was part of DMED research ERC project under the leadership of Anya. And our goal was running online survey experiments testing the impact of 3 original civic education treatments. Now, these civic education treatments were videos, And if in general, running video treatments are more challenging than running treatments with text-based interventions, because many people just, when they come across videos in their surveys, 3 minutes videos in their surveys, they just drop out. So attrition rates are high. One thing to keep in mind if you are running video-based interventions using this method, right? In terms of inference, we can talk about that if you like. But that was our goal. 10 minutes surveys that included one video intervention and then many questions measuring respondents' varying reactions to these interventions, depending on, of course, the treatment group they were assigned into. The data we collected here is from 2023, so it is like 1 year old. But at the end of the presentation, we are also going to present data from Burkina Faso, which is much more recent, like a couple months old. So I think our inferences still apply. Participants were recruited through online Facebook and Instagram ads. Over 90,000 people across the world saw our videos, that is our treatment videos, and 65,000 completed the survey. As I've said, attrition rate here is high. Surveys administered through Qualtrics. Now, as most of you, I'm sure, know, when you are delivering advertisements on Facebook, you can deliver these advertisements targeting certain categories. And this is a good way to ensure the diversity of your respondents, because you can show the same advertisements to different categories, like different age groups, different gender groups. In our case, the default setting was 3 age groups: young, middle age, old, 2 genders, male, female. And default case is that we always targeted people with lower education. We prioritize people with lower education. Still, though, people with higher education, or let's say our samples are biased, were biased towards people with higher levels of education than population average. Our budget was usually around £100 per country per day, and our goal was 1,500 respondents per country. Now, so in our study, we surveyed 33 countries. We picked our countries based on variation across 2 dimensions: Human Development Index and Liberal Democracy Index. As you can see on the screen, we have been, I think, successful in creating that diversity. In the upper quadrant, you see that we run surveys in Australia, UK, USA, countries with higher democracy scores plus higher human development scores. On the other hand, we also run surveys with very low democracy scores, just like Venezuela, Nicaragua, and very low human development index scores like Uganda, Pakistan. So our study in that sense captures to a great extent diversity around the world right now. To ensure feasibility, how did we come up with these 33 countries? Of course, we also took into practical considerations account. So we only focused on countries with a population of at least 2 million Facebook users. That is for concerns of feasibility of research. Maybe if we could go a bit below that, like 1 million and so, but if there isn't even 1 million people in a country, I think the cost will increase a lot, so we didn't include those countries. 2, of course, language, right? We picked countries in which either English or Spanish was the official language. Now, this puts us, of course, in terms of English to a bit difficult, or a bit to a point that needs to be justified, because in some of the countries that we picked, English is an official language, but not everyone, in especially old colonies, not everyone are very comfortable in speaking English. We can talk about this. In Spanish-speaking countries, especially Latin American countries, that's not usually the problem. Everyone in those countries mostly speaks Spanish. On top of that, we also conducted survey in Turkey, as since I could offer Turkish language support. We considered running surveys in Arabic and French using the same logic, just creating survey in a language and then running in multiple countries. At the end of the day, we decided not to do that, but I think running surveys in Arabic speaking and French speaking countries can also be a good way to increase diversity in your samples. Okay. So here you see a map of countries in which we run our surveys and number of regular Facebook users in these countries. As you will see, the cases we selected from Latin American countries are also have a significant amount of regular Facebook users. Same applies for the more advanced countries like US, Australia, Turkey. On the other hand, in African countries, the number of regular Facebook users is usually smaller. Okay, so one of the major considerations, if you are thinking about running surveys through Facebook and Instagram, you are probably doing that because you are thinking about costs, right? I think costs should, Facebook surveys are better than mostly better than commercial panel companies in the global south, even beyond the cost consideration. But cost is an important consideration. So how did we do in terms of cost? That's the big question, right? And here on the screen, you see all 33 countries in our sample and the distribution of cost across these countries. Now, a big thing here is that there is huge variation in terms of the cost. Running surveys in Singapore is 20 times more expensive than running surveys in Kenya or Pakistan. That is cost per person. Even then, of course, like in Singapore, it is $4 per person, so it is not too bad, but still there's a huge variation. It's expensive in Singapore, it's expensive in Australia, Hong Kong, Spain. On the other hand, with United Kingdom, you see that it is less than $1. With United States, you see that it was $1. And so even between developed countries, you see a significant variation in costs. Where is that variation coming from? Now, it is impossible to know this for sure, in the sense that Facebook works through a bidding mechanism, an automatic bidding mechanism. So you buy advertisement space, but the price eventually depends on who also wants to buy advertisement space for your audience. So if you are showing your advertisements to young people living in Kenya, then the cost of your advertisements will be determined by the competition for young people living in Kenya. These costs will depend a bit on the time of your advertisement. So for example, if you are running advertisements during Christmas time, then prices will be higher because there will be many other companies trying to run advertisements. But it is really a black box. You just tell Facebook how much money you have, and Facebook just returns you social media users, clicks, and so on in return for that. And it's a black box, but we can have some ideas. So here are our three ideas. One question we think, one of the sources in the cost variation is how much reach you can buy in a single country based in that particular country. And there's a huge variation in that regard. Now, reach is the number of people who will see your advertisements based on the budget you have. And with the same budget here across different countries, we had more or less the same budget. You can see that in the United States, 50,000 people saw our advertisements. It's not much at all. In Bangladesh, it was nearly 500,000, 10 times more. So what is the cost difference here? Where does the cost difference comes from? Of course, you can say that if purchasing power in a country is higher, if the costs of items in general is higher, then advertisement space will also be higher. So in that regard, it will be more expensive to run advertisements in wealthier countries, which means that the reach, that is the number of people who will see your ads, will be lower in those countries. And unsurprisingly, United States, United Kingdom, Singapore, Australia, the countries at the lower and of this scale are countries in which not that many people saw our advertisements. So that is one factor that can explain cost difference across countries, but it is not the only factor. Now, another factor, important factor, is what is the proportion of social media users clicking on your advertisements. So that isn't something about Facebook, that's something about your advertisements. How appealing is your advertisements across different countries? In our case, our advertisements were more or less similar. We just use incentives based advertisements. We invited social media users to click on our advertisements so that they can join a lottery for either a grocery store voucher or Amazon card. Now, this, of course, you need to change structure a bit across countries. In the United States, we use Amazon card. Everyone knows Amazon. In African countries, in Latin American countries, there are countries in which Amazon has not penetrated. And in that case, we used local grocery store vouchers. Now, maybe they are popular, maybe not, they are not. You have to do some research in that regard, and you don't really know. So, in that sense, our advertisements were a bit different from each other. And what you see here is that click-through rate, that is the proportion of social media users who clicked on our advertisements. There's a significant variance as well, a significant difference as well. In the United States, nearly 5% of social media users clicked on our advertisements. In Singapore, it was 1%. Now, um, that was a bit of surprise for us because we would, given the similarity of advertisements, we would expect similar results. If more people click on your advertisements, of course, the overall cost will be lower. And that is why in the United States, for example, despite our reach being so small, the costs were not that bad. It was just $1, if you remember. On the other hand, in Singapore, it's an expensive country. Reach was small. On top of that, also click-through rate was low as well, which increases the cost significantly. Australia as well, click-through rate is only 2%, and also advertisement space was expensive, making Australia a case that is difficult to recruit respondents. Okay. And finally, how many Facebook users are there in the country? That is the third question, right? The more Facebook users there are, the better. And of course, there's a huge variation in that regard in our sample as well. We have so many Facebook users in India, which means that it's such a more diverse and larger pool compared to African countries in which number of regular Facebook users were much smaller. And Singapore as well, again, just 5 million regular Facebook users. Now, going back, this is the slide that I had already shown you, slide about the survey cost. Clearly, you see here, in countries in which population is small, it's an expensive country, and for whatever reason, respondents, social media users do not click on your advertisements. These are countries in which running advertisements will be more costly. And Australia was in that group as well. Singapore, Australia, Hong Kong. Spain costs around $2. My experience is that in EU countries, usually that's the cost. On the other hand, it was so much cheaper to run advertisements in African countries, mainly because reach was higher. It was easier to also recruit, to get higher click-through rates in most countries. Okay, so that is one issue. The other issue is how well we do in terms of representativeness, right? In terms of the diversity of our sample. This is especially the case if you are concerned about generalizing your findings to the broader population. It is not always the only function of Facebook and Instagram advertisements. In the past, we have hosted researchers who use these advertisements to reach hard to reach populations, to recruit from hard to reach populations like migrants. That's a completely separate goal. But if you want to generalize to the population, then you will be worried about comparisons to population benchmark. Now, of course, the very first thing here is uh, what is the percentage of population reachable on Facebook? Now, you see the variation across countries in our sample. In general, in Latin American countries, population coverage is great. Like Chile, it was 95% reachable on Facebook. On the other hand, Argentina, very good scores. Peru, very good. On the other hand, in African countries, you see that the population that is reachable on Facebook gets very small. And you can just conclusion is easy. In African countries, it will be so much more difficult for you to get a sample that you can, in which you can get closer to population benchmarks. So this is the background. Let's see how well we did, right? Before that, uh, that's the background. What did we do to improve the representativeness? Now, Facebook is not your friend in this regard. Why? Because Facebook wants to deliver advertisements to people who are more like, who are very similar to people who already clicked on your advertisements. So the algorithm will just find a certain demographic group and will try to recruit more and more from that group. To minimize that algorithm bias, you can do targeting. We talked about this one in our previous sessions, so I'm sure many of you know about these. One thing is that one recent change is that Facebook is becoming less supportive of targeting. I think there is a broader consensus that targeting actually doesn't work very well for advertising, political advertising. Um, so in that regard, now Facebook uh, just makes only age, gender, and location, offers age, gender, and location as exclusive targeting categories, which means that if you choose age, gender, if you do targeting based on age, gender, and location, then Facebook will stick to your targeting and will not deliver your advertisements beyond your categories regarding these three. But for all other ones, Facebook will go beyond and try to deliver. Like you can tell Facebook to deliver your advertisements to people with lower education. But if Facebook detects that actually your advertisements works well in recruiting people with higher education categories, then it will not stick to your choices in that regard. And also the default option, the last time I have seen, is doing no targeting at all. Like Facebook first starts with no targeting at all. You have to choose age, gender, and location secretly through a hidden box, a hidden option. So anyway, but still you can do targeting. And in our case, we did age and gender targeting. And also we picked education categories. In some cases, in some countries like Singapore and Australia, when we discovered that recruiting respondents were actually tough, we'd sometimes just removed targeting options we had selected and run one single campaign for the entire country, one single advertisement set for the entire country, which increased, of course, the biases in the sample. Now, another thing you can do, another thing we did, is using incentive-based advertisements. This is on screen. You see a working paper that we wrote, and it has just been accepted at Public Opinion Quarterly. Hopefully, it will be published soon. Online, you can find preprint through OSF website. Our previous research showed that incentive-based advertisements are better in terms of recruiting research participants in terms from diverse backgrounds. So all of our advertisements were incentive-based. We didn't mention about the political nature of our surveys, at least on Facebook. Instead, we invited people for a lottery. Okay, now let's look at our results. Into in terms of main categories. First of all, gender, right? You want probably a more or less equal distribution across these across gender, across male and female categories. Now, in our case, we did very well in terms of gender. What you see here on the screen is that in no country the difference across two groups was higher than 20%, higher than 20 points. It was in any country it wasn't more than 60% for any of gender categories. And also it is distributed equally, like the biases distributed more or less equally across countries, which means that in some countries we over recruited men, in some countries we over recruited female. If we wanted only to recruit male or female, we would be able to do that as well. So in terms of female, I think gender categories, I think we did a good job. Okay, in terms of age, now this is a bit tougher, especially because in African countries, population is young, and on top of that, coverage is very low. Facebook coverage is very low, and population that has access to social media is usually young people. So, which means that it's very difficult to reach older people in African countries, and you can see that. You can see a huge bias in terms of towards younger people in some of these countries, like Uganda and Ghana. On the other hand, um, in Latin American countries, usually you see that we were less successful in recruiting younger people. So our population was more biased towards older people in these countries. Same goes. I mean, this is just the other part of the coin. If we just look at older people again, um, you can see that we under recruited older people in Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, in Hong Kong and Singapore. As again, um, since it was more expensive to recruit respondents, we didn't do targeting, and that resulted in a higher proportion of older people. Okay, having said these, um, putting African cases aside, I would say that if we wanted to recruit just young people or just old people, we probably would be able to do that. That's because, as I have said, Facebook allows you to do exclusive targeting in those cases. One big problem, on the other hand, is university degree. Now, again, our failure in recruiting respondents that are matching population benchmarks in education is more clear in African countries, Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, but also in Southeast Asian countries like Pakistan, India. There's a huge difference in terms of our sample and population benchmarks in this category, in university degrees categories. Now, However, however, there are some cases in which we did very well, and these are not necessarily developed countries with higher proportion of university graduates. If you look here around zero, these are the countries in which we were able to match population benchmark around zero, and you see in El Salvador, in Paraguay, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, Mexico, Peru, Argentina, Honduras, Nicaragua, we came very close to population benchmarks in terms of university degree. Why this is the case? I think this is something about the common use of Spanish language across all education groups in old Spanish colonies. I don't know the specific answer, but there's clearly a trend here. If you run your surveys in Spanish-speaking countries, you will have a better chance of recruiting mostly people or getting very close to population benchmarks. In these countries, only 15%, 20% is have university degrees, and that was the case in our sample as well. Okay, now okay. So I have shown you how we did in terms of main population benchmarks, right? But what's your alternative here? Your alternative is to work with a commercial panel company, which can be great in some cases, which may not work that well in other cases. So to see how well a commercial panel company would do in one of challenging cases for us, Uganda, we got some data from our colleagues. Edward and Rebecca generously shared their data, the data that they collected, just like last month in Uganda. They work with TGM Research. This is an incentive-based online panel. This is a company running incentive-based online panels in more than 80 countries. They say they recruit through organic growth, affiliates, and ads. Ads, of course, are same with what we do, but they also say that they probably they share posts on social media, or they recruit through other resources as well. Now, how did this company do in Uganda? Okay, on the screen, you see the results for Uganda. Here it is Afrobarometer results, that is we can take as showing, demonstrating population benchmarks. On the left, you see DMET results for these categories, DMET proportions, and in the middle, you see TGM, the survey company's results. Now, you can see that both our sample and TGM sample are very far away from population benchmark in terms of university degree. So if you are doing online surveys in the African content, African continent, then this is, I think, something that you have to accept. You will have a very hard time recruiting or matching population benchmark. On the other hand, in terms of, they also do better than us in terms of female, the proportion of female respondents, younger respondents, older respondents across all these categories. Actually, TGM sample is closer to Afrobarometer sample than what we did. On the other hand, though, just look at the cost of per respondents, right? In TGM, one respondent cost £8. $8. In our case, it was like less than $1. And of course, we recruited twice more than that. So I'm thinking, if we didn't drop any of survey respondents, if we start dropping survey respondents, that, like, if we start implementing quotas, then we would probably get closer to TGM sample in terms of our demographic distribution. On the other hand, there's also a huge cost difference. So this is the broader picture. This is things that you need to consider whether you want to when you try to decide whether you will work with online samples or a commercial panel company. I think they can serve different purposes in this regard. Now, okay, so one last thing is before concluding, two last things actually. One of the things that we want to talk about is how well we did when we actually tried to do quota sampling. That is, when we just focused on separate cells. That is, like if 5% of population is old female, then let's just keep our sample to that group, and then let's just ensure that only 5% of our sample comes from that group, and close advertisements after that. Would quota sampling work in a case like Burkina Faso? Now, Burkina Faso is an African country, of course, and it's a small country. There are only 2 million Facebook users in Burkina Faso, so it was a challenging case. We recruited people from Burkina Faso in December 2024, so it's very recent. Now, what did we do? We created cross-cutting groups. We targeted cross-cutting groups based on age, gender, and geographic location. And we created separate ads for all of these groups. So our goal was to run advertisements until we match population benchmark in that group. One of the population groups, one of the categories here, for example, old females from rural towns. We will just keep advertisement open until we recruit enough people from that group. Did this work? Well, not completely. We closed the ads that reached targeted sample while keeping others open. But in some cases, we were never able to recruit enough respondents, even though we kept advertisements for those categories open for a longer time. So here on the screen, you see the distribution, the proportion we recruited from each group. So for example, we had a target in this is rural category on the left side. If you look older, that is over 36 and above, sorry for all 36 and above people, older people category, female and rural, we only recruited 10% of what we targeted based on population benchmark. So even if you keep your advertisements open for a longer time, sometimes the pool is just not enough. There will not be enough interest in your advertisement, especially in a country like Burkina Faso. Only 27 we could reach, 27 in terms of female living in rural area, middle-aged female living in rural area, and so on. On the other hand, we over recruited from capital region in Burkina Faso. Okay. So this is, at the end of the day, we interpreted this as a failure of quota-based targeting. If you really need to reach population benchmarks, you can, of course, at least in the case of African countries, you can, of course, do weighting, but there are also many debates about the usefulness of weighting regarding, like the categories that you do not weight and how much it will be helpful in terms of those categories. Okay. Now, so finally, let's talk about disadvantages and challenges of this data collection method. As I have mentioned in the very beginning of this presentation, a couple years ago, when we first started talking about this method, we would just say, well, this is great because you can just set up your advertisements today and start running advertisements tomorrow in any part of the world. Now, this is no more the case. Our own experience and what we hear from other people, right? Meta is getting more and more aggressive with its spam detection algorithms. And there are other changes in Meta policies as well. Last year, for example, or the previous year, we introduced Michael Zurop from Meta and his research unit that was devoted to solving researchers' problems when they run advertisements on Facebook. What kind of problems you can face with? Well, due to these spam detection algorithms, for example, Facebook bans advertisements accounts, and so on. And in my experience, at least, Michael and his team was very helpful. Now, Facebook doesn't have that unit anymore, unfortunately, as far as I can tell. In the recent, these things are of course closely related to the change in political climate, economic climate, and one of the units that they cut over the last year was that unit. As I understand from outside. So when you face with problems, there is no devoted academic unit. At least if you find one, let me know. Instead, you need to go through the regular units, Facebook's regular problem solving units, which isn't that helpful anyway. And also, Meta is moving away, as I mentioned, from detailed targeting options, making it harder for you to target, but targeting was a key functionality for us. So there are all these challenges, right? On the other hand, on top of those, there are some other problems. There are some usual problems. There are problems that existed 2 years ago as well. That is, your samples will be a bit skewed, so it will not be suitable for descriptive research to estimate population distribution. You can address that problem with weighting to a certain extent, but not completely. And also, maybe this is a bit different from working with a commercial panel company. Commercial panel companies work with users who already registered in their panels, users who trust those companies. In your case, when you are running advertisements on Facebook, you are completely coming from out of blue for people in their daily routine, and you are asking them to take survey. There may be trust issues. People may not may think that you are a foreign agent, you are collecting data for an authoritarian government for political reasons, and so on. So there can be that concern as well. So these are main disadvantages, I would say, or challenges. So what are some ways to deal with these challenges? Um, First of all, you need to consider this as a medium-term investment for your methodological toolbox. I would say, in the if you are not, if you will just run surveys for one time in one country, maybe it's not worth your time to deal with this, because um you can face with account ban, you can face with account closure, advertisement ban, and so on. You can have a difficult time setting up Facebook pixel, which lets you to decrease costs, and so on. It takes some time to learn how to use these tools successfully. That is one thing. The second thing is that um, if you want to run advertisements smoothly, it is not a very good strategy, I think, to just start a new Facebook page and run advertisements through Facebook, through that Facebook page. That is because um Facebook, if you create an page, Facebook page today, and tomorrow you start spending £100 per day for advertisements, Facebook thinks that this is just a spam, right? In for those algorithms, the typical example is a Facebook page belonging to a small business or large business that has been used regularly, that communicates with people and sometimes runs advertisements. But you are completely outside of that trend, that pattern, if you just created a Facebook page and start running advertisements tomorrow. So what you should do? We are using University of Glasgow web page. I recommend the same strategy to you as well. Uh, it may be a bit challenging, of course, like when you contact your university social media team, and you tell them that you want to run advertisements through them. It may be tricky, but if you can make it work, that is great. Usually in our case, there is a social media company the university works with. We are paying 5% to that social media company, and they are letting us to use that advertisement account, and the university doesn't mind. University is supportive. Hopefully that will be the case for you as well. If that doesn't work, again, think this as a medium term investment and create a Facebook page that works well over time. In one of our previous sessions, Aaron Early presented a very good, their amazing research on uh, migrant populations in Nigeria, and they explained in detail how they established a well working, a trustworthy Facebook page. You need to invest time in that one. Um, and finally, benefit from online pages, online web resources created by other Facebook advertisers. Again, if you will advertise on Facebook, you are part of a very large community around the world. Your problems are usually similar to the problems of small businesses or social media agencies trying to advertise and make money out of it. So you can benefit from the solutions they are coming up. For example, I have seen that some people buy advertisements accounts, all use advertisement account from agencies, and they work better than advertisements account you started right now. But the overall point is that you should consider this as a medium term investment, I think, for your methodological toolbox, and it will work well, especially for you if you are someone who can run surveys across different countries, finding small pots of monies like a couple $1,000 this year, next year, and so on. Then I think this is an especially useful resource for you. Finally, reflection on publication experience. So how did we do in terms of publication? Of course, like, you are doing this because you want to publish, right? What do reviewers think? Now, one thing is that we have published our substantive papers in top journals, top political science journals: American Journal of Political Science, Journal of Politics, British Journal of Political Science, and Comparative Political Studies, for example. So in that regard, uh, it is okay. You can use Facebook and Instagram advertisements to collect data that will then be published in top journals. But you will still have some pushback by reviewers, especially reviewers who are, I think, more familiar with developed country contexts, like um, reviewers who are from the United States, who are from Europe, who work with very well respected commercial panel companies in those countries. They don't understand why you don't just go with YouGov or Qualtrics in a country like Turkey, and get better results. Well, the thing is that there are so many responses to that you can give to that kind of a criticism. Of course, there are usual things that you can say: the internal validity of the experiment, trade-off cross-country research versus single and small and studies. Like, there are not that many alternatives if you want to run surveys in Turkey, for example, in less studied countries outside of the Western countries, advanced developed countries. There are not that many commercial panel companies, but more importantly than that, even Qualtrics sample, for example, in Turkey is much is worse than samples I recruit through Facebook and Instagram. So that some companies are well known and in the UK, US, and they work with large panels doesn't mean that they can also have good panels for the global South countries. Um, so overall, in that regard, there are many things that you can say. There are many things we said, and as I said, so far we have been successful at publishing in top places, top venues. But you should be ready for some pushback as well. This concludes my presentation. I went a bit over the time limit, but now I will just look at the questions if you have raised any questions. Okay. So I have two questions, and let me quickly respond to them. Both from Jessica. Yes, unfortunately, there is no citable reference. Jessica asks whether there is any citable reference for the Uganda comparison to the commercial panel. Unfortunately, there is no. In terms of comparisons to commercial panels, one citation that I know that you can use is a work that compared Qualtrics and Facebook and Amazon MTurk panels across India and the United States in 2020, and which found that Facebook samples were more diverse than Qualtrics panels in India. So I can find the citation and send it to you, Jessica. And the other question is, have you always used Facebook Pixel in the campaigns you presented? Yes, we have always used Facebook Pixel. We have always used conversion targeting in all of our samples. You can visit our first research, our previous research published in PLOS ONE, comparing pixel and conversion algorithms to other algorithms. Our finding is that conversion and pixel-based conversion works much better, so we recommend that one. We always use that one. Okay. One question from Michal, if I am pronouncing correctly. Sorry if I am not. Is it not like snowballing recruitment if Facebook recruits similar people to those who have already clicked? It means that the sample is recruited on a feature that's observable to Facebook but not to you. Exactly. Right? That is right. That is right. That is, well, I mean, of course, it is not snowballing in the sense that that mechanism is more refined, right? Like it is not just one single network. It is not in that sense as biased as snowballing, but you should know that there is a mechanism behind, there's an algorithm behind that produces people, that will produce people that are similar to each other, right? That's what Facebook is trying to do. Now, two things. One, you can use targeting to limit that, right? For every single targeting that you do, you are creating a separate advertisement, and then that mechanism is a new one. Two, as we have shown, still your advertisements are shown to millions of people. If you know, like in the case of Turkey, for example, we have reached 3-4 million people. So, of course, while there is some kind of algorithm behind, the more you advertise in a country, the more diverse set of people you will be reaching. In Bangladesh, as I have shown, the reach was 500,000. So there is no single, these 500,000 people can be coming from no single network. So while that, in that sense, that logic of snowballing, maybe there is a small network similarity here. And also, you shouldn't assume that Facebook is great in terms of recognizing these things. But your broader point is, of course, right. There's here a black box mechanism that is not visible to us. I agree with that, and this is one of the limitations of this one and all other, I think, online self-selection based opt-in surveys, unless of course you recruit through non-probabilistic methods first. Okay, I have a question from Stefan. The fact that you focus on would the fact that you focus ads on the incentive not motivate professional survey takers? Did you try to control for that? Great question. Now, um, I think actually professional survey takers is an important point. And again, let's think in terms of the trade-off here, right? Like in terms of working in a commercial panel company, all respondents are professional survey takers. These are all of the people who signed up that commercial panel company and taking surveys in terms of payment. In our case, you would say that this effect is smaller, much smaller. One thing we have done is that if you check for that our paper on incentives that I have just shown, in which we compared incentive-based advertisements to political-based advertisements, we have found that incentive-based advertisements were better in terms of diversity, recruiting people with a smaller amount of or people with lower amounts of political interest, for example. But it was also better in terms of recruiting people with passing attention checks, producing higher quality data. So overall, I don't have much concerns about professional survey takers. I also actually think that incentive-based surveys are better in that regard. But I take your point. Thank you. I have regarding Komal. I have a question regarding fake accounts. Is there a way to get around the fake accounts on Facebook? And if Facebook uses demographics self-reported by the account holder? Thank you, Komal, for the question. So regarding fake accounts, I mean, here the question is like, of course, we don't care whether a person is on Facebook with their own name or not, right? The question is whether the person is filling out our survey, going back to maybe Stefan's point, to make money out of it. By the way, maybe I should come back to Stefan's point, because of course one of the concerns that you can have when you do incentive-based surveys is whether people are trying to sign up again and again so that they increase their chances of getting money out of it, right? Their chance of lottery. Well, we do Qualtrics feature browse cookies so that people cannot sign up more than once. Also, we drop Qualtrics registers IP addresses for respondents, and we drop people who signed up with the same. We drop entries with same repeating IP addresses, just as a way of checking that one. And we come up with, especially in African countries, we came up with people connecting through the same, or entries sharing the same IP address. So this is one thing to consider. It wasn't huge amounts, but there were like a certain amount of people entries with the same IP address. It can also just be because people are connecting through internet cafe in poorer countries. But going back to Komal's question about fake accounts, well, same answer. People, maybe there may be some cases in which people try to sign up, try to take the survey again to increase their chances at the lottery, We drop entries if they come from the same IP address. We use browser cookies. Browser cookies, of course, if you are a very talented user, then you can just clean your browser cookies and so on, so that you can overcome Qualtrics prevention against multiple survey takers. But with IP address, I think it is harder for the survey taker to know it and overcome it. Overall, though, I'm not, based on my experience, I'm not very concerned about fake accounts or people trying to take the survey again and again. I think these are quite low in terms of overall distribution. Um, did you get informed consent to the use of Metapixel? Uh, yes, this we mentioned that in our consent form when we are giving people privacy notices and in the very beginning of the surveys. So we give notice to people. And so in one case, we did recontacts, like we took phone numbers from people and then recontacted them again. And in that case, also, we informed them that we would recontact. How does Facebook categorize regular users? That is usually people who used Facebook once a month at least. So I think this is a bit exaggerating what regular users mean. Really, it's not daily usage, and when you and the pool itself in a country may be actually smaller than the pool that Facebook promises you. In the case of Turkey, for example, when you choose to advertise broadly, Facebook tells you that you can advertise to 50 million people. In reality, if you keep running your advertisement, you will just start. Facebook will start showing your advertisement to same people after 10 million or so. But yeah, so maybe yeah, that regular users are a bit exaggeration. What's your experience on increasing the daily budget limit for your campaigns? Do you think that can increase linearly the number of responses per day? Um, I have never tried it. I have never tried increasing the daily budget as a strategy for increasing the number of responses. My experience is that, like, okay, so here is that thing, right? Like, my experience has usually been that uh, in early phases, if you double your budget, you will probably get a return a bit less than double. So it is better to keep your budget a bit smaller so that you are not just competing with your own advertisements, for example. So that's why we kept our own budget to £100 per day per country, so that we were not in a rush. We could, just throw 200, £300 a day as well, but that would probably increase cost per return. So that's what we did. But yeah, my experience is a bit limited in this regard. Okay, I think I have answered all of the questions here. Um, and thank you very much, everyone. We have gone 10 minutes beyond the time. Thank you very much for participating it. I hope you found it useful. We will upload the session and slides on our webpage. And in 2 weeks, we will have another session. Hopefully, Anya will also be able to join us then. We will have another session in which we will talk about using WhatsApp Data Explorer. Okay, bye bye.